A&E's biography, again, for whatever reason, 1 hour episodes this past week. And one of them was about someone you are, of course, associated with whenever anyone thinks of him, Yokozuna.
Yeah, and honestly, I thought this was one of the better ones. Honestly, yes, you could have shown so much more video footage and highlight. It could have been a 2-hour show, but the sad thing is, honestly, maybe an hour was right for Yoko because of his career, unfortunately, being brief. I mean, they did skip over the first 4 years or so with just, you saw him, at a Florida clip in 1987, his debut down there. And then, pretty much they skipped right ahead to the WWF. But nevertheless, I think this was one of the sadder ones because not only was everything they said about him true, he was always laughing. He was like a big kid and mischievous grin or whatever. And of course, he's sitting there 600 pounds, but he's a mischievous little kid. But it shows how much the whole family loved him. And they do. We've talked about the Samoan family at whatever point that one was successful would take care of the other ones that were not necessarily so at that point in time. And they would help each other out. And the story that Fatu told about Rikishi for the modern, audience about, when Yoko was on top and Fatu was doing okay and he needed a furnace. And he said, he gave me a check so that my kids would have heat. And that's what it's sad, but, like I said, maybe an hour was right on this one for this, particular subject. But, I didn't know about his life as a kid because, and honestly, it's always hard when all the Samoans come in the locker room and it's like, they're all related, but you can't keep track of who's kid and who's uncle and who's nephew and et cetera, et cetera. But I knew obviously that he had trained with Alpha and Sika, and, they sent him to Pensacola along with Samu and Fatu, who were training at the time down there because that's where the Samoans were located. That was before Allentown. But I didn't know that, that he was a kid who was going to getting in trouble, and they, his parents sent him to them for some kind of guidance. But did you see the Florida clip on his debut? It was Barry and Kendall Wyndham against
Camp Cornette.
Well, he was against Kokina. Kokina was Yoko's name when he first started, and his partner was Jimmy Backlund, who would later become Jimmy Del Rey. And you didn't see a clip of Jimmy, but you heard the ring introduction, so his name was mentioned. You didn't see a clip of him, but I thought that's insane that's 1987. In 6 years, I will be managing both of these guys in the WWF. Kokina as the WWF champion and Jimmy Backlund, a perennial Florida underneath guy, as suddenly one of the heavenly bodies. So that was but did you see, again, to go back and look at the first couple of years of Rodney's career, was he around maybe 330 in his first match? I've seen, Samu and Fatu bigger when they were the Samoan SWAT team. He was still the big Samoan, but you had no idea he was going to weigh 600 pounds. And that's how, the early talent that he showed, the sharp splash, the facials, the aggression, moving like that for his size, that's why he attracted so much attention. But I'd forgotten how small he was when he started out.
That's the thing. You started seeing pictures of him in the magazines. And even though you're saying he was smaller when he started out, he was still bigger than Samu and Fatu, or the Tonga Kid, who we were used to seeing in the magazines.
Yeah, and all the Samoans over time get bigger. Obviously, Rikishi, was what, 100, 125 pounds smaller than his Rikishi weight when he started. But I just still, it was shocking because when I got by 6 years later, he was over 500 and something. I think when I got there, he started in the WWF. He's 25 years old. Because when he started wrestling, he was 21, but he had 2 kids, and that's what the Samoans said, we got to find you something to do, maybe get in the family business, and then they could pitch him to Vince because, they had Vince's ear and they had the in. And, I just, again, looking at that, you would have never dreamed that he would get that fucking large at that quick of a time. When he came in October 92, I came in July 93, and they were saying that he had gained, that he was in the upper 4s when he made his debut there, and he was well into the 5s by the time I got there. And I know, Vince would introduce him in those early at 505 pounds. Vince loves to say shit like that. Vince could have been P.T. Barnum in a previous life, or he could have been the Carnival Barker on the, on the stage in front of the Midway. And he's 8 feet tall, or he's 500 pounds. But, and that's another thing, is that they showed the footage that I don't know if it ever aired or if they were just testing it out. It was dark stuff, but of them trying to pitch him as another member of the Samoan family. Well, this is Coquina Maximus.
And no, it never aired. Never aired.
Okay. I didn't think it did because that was the thing. Sergeant Slaughter, they had the clip. Vince was like, what the fuck? It wasn't working. And you could tell it wasn't working from the lack of audience reaction. And Sarge told Vince, well, you got 7 Samoans now. Vince said, I've got 7 Samoans now. And Sarge said, what about a sumo? And that was the thing, I think, that made the difference, because Vince always loved the Samoan family. And I'm not saying that, he shouldn't have given any of them a job, but there was always, remember when instead of just letting Fatu go at one point and just let him go away and so we can miss him, they made him the Sultan, like he was a masked Arab, and this and that. They had so many Samoans for so long that when Yoko comes along, he didn't stand out because it was in the same vein. When they completely changed the gimmick and put him with Fuji and presented as something that they'd never had in the WWF before, a sumo wrestler. And, they had to make the point of mentioning in the show that, how did they phrase it? American knowledge of Japanese culture was in its infancy and et cetera, so that it wouldn't be taken as offensive. Well, I think we all still knew what fucking sumo wrestlers were, but for the sake of, the gimmick, a lot of the WWF fans didn't.
Well, I mean, no one knew what the word Yokozuna was unless you were watching sumo, but what was the other option? Well, here is Sumo Sam. I mean,
yeah,
only so many things you could do.
But anyway,
the one thing,
go ahead.
Yeah, just I wanted to say, because I hadn't watched any clips from the Royal Rumble 93 in a long time, where for whatever reason, Randy Savage thought it was a good idea to try to pin Yokozuna, causing Yokozuna to throw him over the top rope and win the Royal Rumble.
You know why he did that?
Why?
Because he had done the spot before where probably with Andre, where Andre kicked him off out of a cover over the top rope. And he said, it'd be neat, brother.
Well, that's what he did. And it made no sense, and it made him look like a fool.
but it was cool. It fucking got Yoko over.
But Yokozuna debuted on TV in October, November, December, just having squash matches with Mr. Fuji, who was all of a sudden wearing a new outfit, not feuding with anyone. Not to say he wasn't working with anyone in the house shows, but he was just wrestling on TV in squash matches.
Right.
It was shocking to me as a kid that he was going to be the one to win the Royal Rumble. And then it really made him a star. when people talk about that era, he's someone that most fans would know right away. So there's a great example of taking a guy who's been on TV for a few months but not doing anything, and in one night.
Yeah, well, that's Vince McMahon especially knows how to make a monster. And that's what they did here, and it was classic. But they had a guy who nobody had seen before, but was incredibly impressive and had, talent in the ring beyond his level of experience, and is a fucking giant in some fashion. And all you got to do is smash him over with those squash matches. And his stuff got over. I believed his shit when I was at ringside. And honestly, as you know, he could be stiff if he wanted to be and flatten a motherfucker, but also he actually bonsai dropped me either 2 or 3 times. And fuck, you can't tell. It was like a pillow being dropped on my chest, but you couldn't tell the difference when you watch it back. There's
a few guys he did not do it so lightly.
Well, no, yes, and I'm not saying that, but unless he just wanted to, you couldn't really tell a fucking difference in most of it. It looked great. So his stuff, and they smashed him over, and then he wins the Rumble. And, that's the way that in the territory days, that was the way a monster was made. And you could get somebody that nobody in that particular territory had ever seen. In modern day 1992-3 WWF, it was harder because you had seen most people, but this guy was so new and he had been, the AWA and blah, blah, blah. But for that wide of an audience, he came out of nowhere and it got over and he had a different look. So anyway, and, all the locker room stuff was right, joking around, making faces, and the eating as well. But again, poor Brett. No wonder he was fucking pissy. That whole WrestleMania 9 thing.
Oh yeah.
Good Lord.
Hogan shows up, didn't even bother to bleach his eyebrows. Skinnier than you've ever seen him before, with a black eye. It's okay. Put him right where he belongs right now at this stage. Him and Brutus against Money Inc. When he showed up at the end of the night, even me as a kid, I was like, oh no! And a lot of other people felt that way.
But in hindsight, Yokozuna beating Hulk Hogan meant more for Yokozuna than it would have if he'd, at that point in time, if he'd have beat Brett.
That's why beating Luger Luger beating Yokozuna right after that would have meant so much.
But not 6 to 9 months after that.
No. And not even then.
Yeah. A lovely clip of me and Yoko on Regis and Kathy. Do you know I got paid twice for that?
Why twice?
For that, they reran it.
Oh, of course.
When you do Regis and Kathy Lee, you do not. The WWF doesn't pay you. Regis and Kathy Lee pays you. You get scale, whatever scale was. It was $562.47 or whatever at the time. But son of a gun, they reran it like 6 months later. I got a second check in the mail, I'll have you know.
That was a bit of a hard handshake with Regis there, Jim.
He was a stiff son of a gun. He was so exuberant. He really, honest to God, he was a huge wrestling fan and loved that shit. And loved to do that, the stuff with Yoko and everything. And he was just very into it. That's why he had so many of the boys on his show all that time. Kathy Lee was not there that day. Who was it that...
Every single time you talk about this, you ask that question.
I can never remember that woman's name.
Neither one of us.
She was a non-entity in my experience on the show. And you know what? I felt bad because they wouldn't let Fuji go out.
What do you mean?
They did, because the show they wanted, well, who's going to be speaking? Well, that's me. And it's kind of like, well, what's he there for? Well, Fuji's his manager. I'm his American spokesperson. And they just, well, it would be confusing to the soccer moms and middle-aged ladies watching the show. I don't know.
Who's producing? Kevin Dunn? It would be confusing to have Fuji there waving the Japanese flag?
I'm just telling you.
So Fuji was there backstage?
As I recall, yes.
Did he get
As I
paid?
recall, he got paid. Somebody paid. I guarantee you, if they didn't pay him, Vince paid him. But anyway, and the Undertaker matches, that was we were talking about when they did the Taker, one of the many Taker documentaries. God, there's been so much programming. I'd have killed for documentaries on Buddy Rogers in the 80s from his career in the 50s and 60s. But the matches with Taker, I said that was the first time that Taker really got to show what he could do athletically, because what it had been, he debuted in what, 91 or 92, Taker?
Undertaker debuted Survivor Series 90.
90, all right.
Well, November 90, so the end of the year.
So it was 91, 92, almost the end of 93. That had been 3 years. He'd had El Gigante, and he had this, but not anybody athletic. Yoko was not fit the role that Vince liked because he was a monster and a giant in his own way. But at the same time, he was still so athletic that he could do enough shit that Taker could do his shit. The more flying clotheslines and bigger, looking things that, he was capable of, but didn't have anybody to realistically do it with.
So Undertaker's in the middle of his run working with monsters and giants. He started with Kamala, then Giant Gonzalez, eventually Yokozuna. Do you remember who was in the middle there? In between?
Well, it was Sid. Was it? No, Sid. There wasn't
no Sid
a
yet.
Sid there. Was it Bundy?
It was Mr. Hughes.
Oh, Mr. Hughes. That's right.
And then he was gone. Then he was gone.
And then you were gone.
Did you ever actually witness him fall asleep in the ring?
Yeah, no, I saw him fall asleep in the locker room and like in promos, and even at, you couldn't tell a gorilla because it wasn't lit up real well. It's dark anyway, right? But yeah, not in the ring. But see, again, I was only doing TV and pay-per-view. I wasn't doing most of the selected house shows, garden every once in a while, whatever. So I wasn't on the road with them all the time. I was there the day when he broke the toilet. I remember them coming in and talking about that.
Yokozuna?
That they mentioned on that. He cut himself bad too. It was bad. We felt sorry for him.
Well, it's porcelain. That's sharp. Yeah.
He was just too big for his environment. And, even before he got as big as he was going to get. And there was a clip of me, for people who asked on Twitter, that's still some of the stuff they shot in preparation for the Hall of Fame 2017 when I indicted the Rock and Roll Express, and they got comments and etc. So it wasn't new, but I'm not going to sue or anything because it was me, and I still feel the same way. But anyway, at that point with his size getting out of hand, they started trying to talk to him. And who was it that was it Keith Elliott Greenberg that was estimating his weight? He was a bad estimator. He kept saying, oh, he must have been over 600 pounds. He was over 600 pounds in 94 and 95. It by Survivor Series of 96, at which point in time, that was the last time that he could wrestle in New York State, and that's when they ended up, calling for the physical that he couldn't pass, and the company let him go. He was 802, is what I was told, because and also Bruce, he spoiled.
He's also 802 pounds.
But no, he's not. Only his ego. No, and no, Bruce spoiled the whole Duke story because he didn't do the Duke program at home. He did the Duke program at Duke. Remember?
That's the way you've always told me.
Well, yes, because I was on the phone unless he went all the way to North Carolina to make it look good. I was one calling the fucking phone number. But here's the deal. I can't remember all the dates, but remember they had turned him babyface in 95. Right? And Or was it early
I
96?
think it may have been 96.
It was 96 because, okay, remember, Yoko was gone for a while. And then they brought him back and put him and Owen together as a surprise tag team that ended up winning the belts. That was sometime later in 95, I believe. At one point, Yoko, that had either been an injury and or something that they were trying, he was trying to do to help his physical condition. And then he comes back, and then I get Vader, and we all turn on Yoko and beat him up, and he's a babyface, but Vader breaks his leg sometime like around WrestleMania time in 96. And that's where they showed the shot of Vince loved the idea of a stretcher. They can't, the EMTs, the medical people, they can't take Yokozuna out on a stretcher. They have to take him out on a forklift because he's so big. That's what the visual Vince wanted.
And they show it in the documentary, right? When they say that's how they have to weigh him at the shows now. And then they show him being carted off on the thing.
Well, yes, it was footage of the angle where Vader broke his leg in quotation marks, and they carried him out on Raw on a forklift. But it was also true because we had to do the same thing, to be honest, and not to embarrass anybody. But with Mark Henry and Big Show here in OVW, when they were sent down here, we had to send them to the junkyard because a regular doctor's office scale, the old kind, with the weights that balance that you can't do in a bouncy ring or the digital or whatever, only goes up to 300. And then Danny Davis, we had one of the medical type scales that slide the weight across that had a counterweight that would go up to 400. So in other words, the regular 300-pound scale, if you put the specific counterweight on the top of it, then you could max out at 400. But that still wasn't big enough for Mark and Show. So we had to drive them once a month over to the fucking junkyard. So, and Yoko was a lot bigger than that. But anyway, Bruce said that he insisted on doing the program at home. That was not the case. They broke his leg, he was off, and they actually sent him to Duke. And then Vince one day, we're writing, says, well, who's heard about Yoko? And we hadn't heard anything about it. Well, JC, now it was my job. Call either, it was every week or every 2 weeks, whatever regular period of time that he wanted to, wanted me to check in, right? And I guess the first week, he had probably been there a few weeks, right? So I said, Yoko, how you doing? Oh, brother, it's great. They got the fluid off. They're getting the fluid off. Because one of the things that also, when you go on a strict medical supervised diet, especially because that's what he would end up passing away of, is fluid around his heart and retention of fluid. They'll give you the diuretics, right? And I know a former acquaintance of mine, they sucked about 120 pounds of fluid off of him in 2 weeks. So Yoko says I'm down over 100 pounds. They got all this fluid off of his. I'm doing great. Okay, beautiful. Great, right? Call you next week or whatever, next time. Yeah, brother, I'm down over 75 pounds. Yeah, it's great. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Okay. And, here's the thing. You can't argue with Yoko. He was such a big, I liked him. I'm just, having to report what I'm told. By the third call, brother, I'm down over 50 pounds. Yes, he did lose weight at the start of the program until he was able to, as what I was told, find somebody there that he could bribe to bring him shit after hours, under the table, behind the scenes, handed in the window, whatever the case may be. And he ended up after whatever, and then he did, I'm pretty sure I remember, leave early as I got to go home, something with the kids, whatever. But I think he either ended up even or gaining weight when he went to Duke, because that's what we were saying around the office, because, this was obviously, he was still with us, so it wasn't in bad taste, but we were saying, we sent him to the Duke weight loss clinic and he ate it. So but that's the story that I heard, was that he had found, and I think I'm not thinking it was like somebody else's family members that were visiting. I think he found somebody at Duke to bribe, which is maybe why, maybe there's some kind of settlement. They didn't want to be involved because of some malpractice. Stephen P. New could jump in on that. But that was the thing. So by Survivor Series 96, and that was in Madison Square Garden, and the entranceway they used to use back in the old days was from the side, as I'm sure you remember. And it was a short aisleway. And by the time it was the 8-man tag, and he got off on the rock bottom, whoever he rock bottomed felt it. That was kind of stiff, and something else happened. And then by the time he walked from the ring back down that short side aisleway and got behind the curtain, he had to sit down in a chair to rest, to get the rest of the way down the hallway to the locker room. And the commissioner saw him. And that's, when they, well, this can't be. But I mean, he was enormous at that point. And honestly, the indie footage they showed afterwards, he was bigger there than he was ever in the WWF. And I don't know if anybody ever weighed him at that point, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was over 900 pounds. From the indie footage of the last year of his life, based on the last time that I saw him and had any idea of his general weight. It was striking.
Hey, listen, WCW stayed away from him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they would have had the same problems in any place. And I think there was probably, I don't know that they made a big play for him, but also I don't know that there was a lot of loyalty with the Samoan family and Vince, to the point where I don't know if he ever even asked or tried to get booked down there. They certainly didn't say anything about it on this, but it's a house organ production.
How different would your life be today if Vince had blocked the Samoan SWAT team from coming in '89?
That's oh my God. Well, our the Midnight Express's run for a couple months there in WCW would have been a lot easier physically if we hadn't had to bounce around for those guys while George Scott was booking. But anyway, but that was the show. I mean, and then obviously the story, he goes to England for the tour over there and passes away in a hotel room. And that's where it was really so sad. You can tell all the family, it's been over 20 years and they're still, broken up as they should be. But that was the sad part to me. And again, you never heard anybody say anything bad about Yoko. Maybe a couple of the job guys he might have landed on.
There was one guy, I swear to God, if he didn't break his sternum, I don't know how. It was full
I know
force.
that one clip. I can't remember who that was, but holy shit.
He bounces off the guy's sternum. It's incredible.
And I don't even think that I don't know whether the guy did something or whether Yoko just fucking misjudged it and was like, oh shit. But his shit, it was believable.
You know who I never realized it until a little while back, and I saw a few things with him and then here again. It seems like low-key, Greg Valentine's like the coolest guy in the world.
Greg's very laid back.
Yeah.
Just very laid back. But yeah, and again, Yoko, that's the thing is, can you imagine, I've talked about this before, we've talked about his matches. Can you imagine the athlete that he could have been at 350 when he was doing that shit with The Undertaker at 600? It was just, to be strong enough to move that weight around. But that was another problem. Then at the end was that he was getting to where he couldn't move it in the right places. And he was, remember that babyface run where he leg dropped me in Indianapolis and basically sat on the side of my head. So where now I can't turn my head nearly as far to the right as I can to the left. And after he's like, "Oh, brother, I'm sorry, I got to step off." You can't be mad at him. He didn't do it on purpose. He tried to take care of me, incessantly, always. So, he was the first one to say, "I'm sorry," before I even told him that, yeah, it cracked about 7 times on the way around. But at that weight, if he couldn't control you in the air with what he was doing with you, it could be dangerous. Like I said, it could be dangerous. Most normal people are going, "What the fuck? The shit when you do it right's dangerous." But that did get to be a problem.
Well, of course, that was another episode of A&E's biography, and we'll review any of the other ones that are interesting going forward. Now,
well, and let me say it here while we're on the subject. The other biography was Charlotte, and I like Charlotte, but it was the same thing with the Rivals episode. Was Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns. That was 4 years ago. For what are we doing now? Historical retrospectives on shit from last Tuesday? I don't want to see biographies of people who are still in their 20s. I don't want to see a historical. 20s. Well, Paige, okay. Soraya, she was last week.
That's true.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to see biographies of people in their 20s, and I don't want to see historical retrospectives of shit that we reviewed on this podcast 3 or 4 years ago. So we're the stuff that's of meatiness and weight, we will be reviewing.
All right. Well, the rest of you can watch the Madcap Moss biography this Sunday on A&E. But Jim, you may not be watching.
Mosh Pit Jones is more marketable.
You may not be watching Mosh Pit Jones on biography, but you could potentially listen to Mosh Pit Jones if you had a band and somehow got the band distributed, and, well, if you had your Raycons.
Well, yes, and the big thing is probably the distribution and the getting the band to begin with, and then getting people to listen to it. Because the Raycons, that's the easy part. You can get Raycons all day long, premium audio at the perfect price point. I love that alliteration. And the thing is, folks, again, the Raycons have been with us for so long. We've told you how great they are, but now they've not only got the everyday earbuds, but they have low latency gaming headphones. And that sounds almost contagious. Low latency gaming headphones, and they got a speaker with a battery that'll last all night long at your next party. And the Raycons start at half the price of other premium audio brands. You can listen to what you want and who you want, when you want, and how you want, and you don't have to listen to the other everyday nuisances and distractions that constantly bother you. You can soundtrack your own life, and because, as I mentioned before, they start at half the price of the other premium audio brands, you can get a pair and a spare and still pay less than you would with some of those other crooks. You can do business with these crooks and spend much less money. And you can keep one in your desk, one on the nightstand, one in your bag, one in the car. You can get about 8 pairs, so that actually just get 1 pair and just don't ever take them out.
No, that's not advised. You should take them out of your ear. And of course, you're going to have to charge them at some point.
Well, couldn't you just plug them in while they're in your ears? And then, boy, I'll tell you what, your hair would stand up.
That's not the way it works.
Charge your Raycons while they're in your ears. Your hair will stand up. You'll look like Don King.
Don't, and you can't, and there is a charger that wouldn't even facilitate this way of charging it. So
stick your finger in the light socket then.
Don't do that. Jesus, don't joke about that.
Well, but see, that's the thing you can't. Who has a finger skinny enough to stick it in a daggum light socket? That's an urban legend. That's a complete myth. You'd have to have a finger so skinny that you wouldn't even have to have a bone in it. So unless you have boneless fingers, you ain't got nothing to worry about. But here's what you can think about.
Let's talk about Raycon.
The Raycons. That's exactly what, if you wouldn't interrupt me, I would talk about these fine Raycons. Look at all of the additional features. You got 3 customizable sound profiles. You got the left profile, the right profile, head on. You can listen to them any of the 3 ways. You've got earbud tap functions. Now, what happens there? Don't tap them too hard. You can cause yourself to go deaf, because In between the eardrum and the earlobe is the earbud. It's right about halfway in. When you stick these Raycons in and you tap the button, well, then it taps your earbud and lets all of the sap and the pus and the pollution out of it.
That's not how it works, no.
And it allows you to hear things more clearly.
It allows you to not have to worry about any of this because none of this will be happening. You'll be sitting there bopping away with your Raycon earbuds, listening to the finest music or maybe a podcast.
It's not an earbud bop function. It's an earbud tap function. Also, noise isolation. You can isolate any one of a particular noise. Let's say you want to know what one noise is, but you can't hear it because there's too many noises. Well, you can isolate that particular noise.
That's not how noise isolation works.
Isn't it? You take a noise and you put it over somewhere by itself. Noise isolation. What's the matter?
That is the most ridiculous thing you've ever said.
There's an awareness mode. When you press the awareness button, it'll be like the Maharishi Mahesh Yogi has come and blessed you, and you will instantly be aware of all things in the universe and the cosmic continuum. Om, Om.
No, that's not part of transcendental meditation.
Well, whatever it may be. Also, custom gel tips for the perfect, most comfortable in-ear fit. Even if you've got two ears, they'll fit. And even if, like in some cases, members of the feather bottom family, you have 3 or more openings that serve as ear orifices, well, you can, the gel tips, they're kind of squishy, where they'll go right in and you just force them if you have to. If you've got a particularly convoluted ear canal, you might have to force it. I've found that if you take a flathead screwdriver and just tap the end of it with a hammer,
No. You have not found that. No, you have not found that, and you don't have to worry about any force. The word force shouldn't be a part of the conversation here.
Well, of course, unless you're a member of the Air Force, in which case we're going to tell you how you can save some money here in a minute. Also, the custom gel tips, as we know, they do come in a variety of flavors: strawberry, grape, lime, pineapple. There's crystal clear call quality on the Raycons. So let's say, for example, you're listening to Mickey and Sylvia.
Oh, interesting.
And all of a sudden you hear, "Oh, lover boy," being called. It's crystal clear. I say, "Lover boy."
How do you call you a lover boy?
Love is strange.
You know, she's the one who started Sugar Hill Records.
Sylvia Robinson.
That's right.
Indeed. Whatever happened to Mickey? Fell by the wayside. Fucking douchebag. She should have brought Mickey with her.
Will you leave Mickey alone? Maybe his family are big supporters of Raycon.
Mickey came first before Sylvia, and then Sylvia takes off and leaves him, starts Sugar Hill Records, and makes a fortune. And where's Mickey?
Well, I don't think they were actually together.
Broke, busted, and disgusted, dicked by the dangle dong of destiny.
They were just two musicians put together. I don't think they were like a couple or anything.
Well, where's your loyalty?
She had a husband.
Well, where's his loyalty? And also, these Raycons are water and sweat resistant. That means if you've got these Raycons in, somebody dumps a bucket of water over your head or slings sweat on you, it bubbles up and comes off just like you've been Rain-X'd.
No, it doesn't bubble up.
Again, 8 hours with the everyday earbuds or 11 hours of playtime with the everyday speaker. That's all. They almost ought to say every day and every night, because you'll go from morning till night with something like that and not know the difference. You'll never know what time it is if you're listening to your Raycon wireless earbuds. And folks, right now...
Don't say that.
Huh?
Don't say that. There's clocks.
You won't care. You're going to leave the outside world behind, baby. Find your groove with the Raycon everyday wireless earbuds. If you're ready to buy something small with a big impact, go to BuyRaycon. That's BuyRaycon.com/JCE, BuyRaycon.com/JCE, 15% off everything you get. Your Raycon order. That's everything you get. Well, it's not going to be 15% off your McDonald's lunch, because you're not getting that from BuyRaycon.com/JCE. But if you go to BuyRaycon.com/JCE, you're going to get 15% off anything they got on sale. And if they have a cheeseburger, let me know, because I'm getting hungry. BuyRaycon.com JCE.